Imagine that you have found yourself in the epicenter of the most energy-intensive process within our stellar system. You are in the core where the density of matter exceeds the density of water by 150 times, and the temperature reaches 15 million degrees Celsius. Continuous thermonuclear fusion takes place around you, where every second 600 million tons of hydrogen are converted into 596 million tons of helium. The remaining 4 million tons of matter instantly annihilate, turning into pure energy in the form of hard gamma radiation. This object does not simply shine. It remains in a state of fragile equilibrium between the crushing force of gravity that seeks to compress it into a point and the colossal radiation pressure that tries to tear it into pieces. Any violation of this dynamics means instant death for all living things. The Sun is not a gentle star. It is a chaotic thermonuclear reactor that keeps us in a state of constant threat of total burning. At first glance, the Sun seems to be a static and predictable sphere of plasma that simply performs its function for billions of years in a row. Astronomers of the past saw in it an ideal geometric figure, a symbol of immovable order. But scientific data obtained with the help of modern observatories paint a completely different picture. Under the surface, which we call the photosphere, an ocean of hot gas seethes, obeying the laws of magnetohydrodynamics, which humanity is only beginning to comprehend. The Sun has an anomalous structure where the corona, the outer atmosphere of the star, is heated to millions of degrees, while the visible surface has a temperature of only 6,000 degrees. This paradox indicates that we are dealing with an object whose energy power is much higher than we are used to believing. But something is wrong with this stability because every 11 years the magnetic field of the star completely flips, provoking periods of extreme chaos. We begin our immersion into the mechanics of the solar threat from the smallest level of scale. Your journey starts with a photon that was born in the core as a result of the collision of hydrogen atoms. You might think that light reaches us instantly, but this photon spends from 10,000 to 170,000 years trying to break through the ultra-dense plasma of the radiative transfer zone. It is constantly absorbed and re-emitted, losing energy and transforming from a deadly gamma ray into visible light. But here is the problem. When this energy finally reaches the convective zone, it turns into giant flows of plasma similar to boiling water in a kettle. These flows create incredibly powerful magnetic fields that intertwine like giant snakes. When these fields get tangled too strongly, what scientists call magnetic reconnection occurs. This is the moment when the accumulated energy breaks out with a force that is capable of distorting the very fabric of space around the star. You are standing on the surface where gravity is 28 times stronger than the gravity of Earth. Your body would be crushed into a thin layer of atoms in a fraction of a second. But physical weight is only the beginning. The real danger lies in the fact that the Sun is not a solid body. Different parts of the star rotate at different speeds, faster at the equator than at the poles. This differential rotation stretches the magnetic field lines until they become so tense that they break through the surface, forming sunspots. These dark zones are places where magnetic fury exits, where the temperature is lower than the surrounding plasma only because the magnetic field blocks the inflow of heat from below. But it gets even worse because it is precisely above these spots that energy for solar flares accumulates. One such flare can release energy equivalent to the explosion of billions of megatons in TNT equivalent. This is a burst of X-ray radiation and ultraviolet light that moves at the speed of light and reaches our planet in just 8 minutes. And this is exactly where everything changes, because a flare is only a prelude to the real cosmic horror known as a coronal mass ejection. Imagine trillions of tons of magnetized plasma that burst out of the corona and fly through interplanetary space at a speed of several million kilometers per hour. This is not just a cloud of gas. It is a giant electromagnetic projectile the size of millions of kilometers. If such an ejection is directed directly at Earth, our magnetosphere becomes the only line of defense between us and the total burning of our technological infrastructure. When this stream of particles crashes into the magnetic field of the planet, it causes a geomagnetic storm that compresses our natural armor and makes it vibrate. This is not a theoretical threat. In the year 1859, the Carrington event occurred, when a solar superstorm caused telegraph lines to spark and catch fire, and the northern lights were visible even in the tropics. In our modern world where everything depends on microchips and power grids, such an event would send civilization back to the Stone Age in a matter of hours. But this is not even the worst part, because we are protected only as long as our own magnetic shield works. The sun constantly releases the solar wind, a stream of charged particles flying in all directions. This wind creates the heliosphere, a giant bubble that protects us from interstellar radiation. However, the sun is an unstable partner. In the history of our planet, there were periods when the activity of the star dropped sharply, as happened during the Maunder minimum. At that time, Europe and North America plunged into a little ice age. The temperature dropped, crops failed, and millions of people found themselves on the brink of starvation. This demonstrates how vulnerable we are to the slightest fluctuations in the thermodynamics of our star. We exist in a very narrow range of temperatures, and the smallest failure in the operation of this cosmic engine can turn Earth either into an icy desert or into a scorching hell similar to Venus. But the real horror lies not in technology, but in your own biology, because you are only a collection of complex molecules that exist thanks to a very delicate balance. The sun emits not only visible light, it bombards space with streams of ionizing radiation. If not for the magnetic field of Earth and the ozone layer, your deoxyribonucleic acid would be torn to pieces in a matter of seconds. X-rays and high-energy ultraviolet rays cause double-strand breaks in the cell chains, which leads to uncontrolled mutations or the immediate death of the cell. When astronauts of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration go beyond the limits of low Earth orbit, they face this danger directly. Cosmic rays of solar origin pierce the human body through and through, leaving microscopic burns in the brain tissues and the retina of the eyes. Even on the surface of the planet during strong solar storms, passengers of airplanes at high latitudes receive a dose of radiation equivalent to several chest X-rays during a single flight. And this is where we encounter what science calls Miyake events, which are much scarier than anything we have seen in written history. By studying the annual rings of ancient trees, scientists have discovered anomalous jumps in the content of carbon-14, which indicate that thousands of years ago the sun emitted flares tens of times more powerful than the Carrington event. We do not know why this happens and when it will repeat again. Imagine that the atmosphere of Earth does not just glow from the polar aurora, but literally becomes a conductor for giant electric currents that burn out transformers all over the planet. This is not just a power outage. It is a complete degradation of civilizational links. Without electricity, the pumps that supply water, the cooling systems of nuclear reactors, and the logistical food supply chains stop. We are at a distance of one unsuccessful magnetic ejection from a global collapse, and the sun will give us no warning other than a short flash of light 8 minutes before the impact. But it gets even worse when we consider the sun not as a source of energy, but as a gravitational dictator. The gravity of our star is so powerful that it bends the trajectories not only of planets, but also of a huge number of asteroids and comets in the Oort cloud. Any disturbance in the solar corona or a change in mass due to constant radiation could theoretically affect orbital resonances. However, the greatest danger lies in what we do not see. The sun is constantly losing mass, ejecting about 1.5 million tons of matter every second through the solar wind. This means that the grip of the star over the planets is slowly but inevitably weakening. This leads to the fact that the orbits of the planets expand very slowly, but this expansion will not save us from the future hell. And here is the main problem about which scientists remain silent in popular textbooks, because it is too large scale for human perception. The sun has been in the main sequence stage for about 4.5 billion years, and every 100 million years its brightness increases by approximately 1%. This sounds like a negligible figure, but in cosmic scales, it is a death sentence. In 1 billion years, the sun will become 10% brighter than it is today. This will lead to the surface of Earth heating up to a temperature where the oceans will simply begin to evaporate. Water vapor is a powerful greenhouse gas, which will create a closed loop of overheating. The atmosphere of our planet will turn into a humid greenhouse where complex life will become impossible. Even without flares and storms, the sun is slowly and methodically preparing the sterilization of our planet simply at the expense of its inevitable physical evolution. But this is not even the worst part, because we are approaching the moment when the sun will exhaust the supplies of hydrogen in its core. When this happens, the internal pressure will drop, and gravity will begin to compress the core with incredible force. This compression will heat the helium core to such an extent that the burning of hydrogen in the surrounding shell will begin. The star will begin to bloat, turning into a red giant. It will increase in size hundreds of times, swallowing Mercury and then Venus. The sky over Earth will turn into a solid wall of red plasma. Even if our planet is not physically swallowed, it will turn into a charred piece of rock without an atmosphere and water, orbiting a giant crimson monster that once gave us life. The sun will literally eat its children to prolong its own existence for a few more million years. But there is something much more mysterious that we observe with the help of the Parker probe, which is now in the immediate vicinity of the solar corona. Scientists have discovered strange switchings of the magnetic field, which they call switchbacks. These are sudden changes in the direction of the solar wind that cause the plasma to move at a speed that classical physics cannot fully explain. This indicates that mechanisms of energy transfer are acting inside the sun about which we have no idea. We think that we understand how our star works, but in reality, we are only observing the surface of a giant engine, the internal mechanics of which remain hidden behind impenetrable layers of plasma. If these processes get out of control, or if the sun enters a new phase of activity that we have not yet seen, we will be absolutely defenseless. But the real scale of the threat opens up only when we go beyond the limits of our planetary system and consider the sun as a traveler in interstellar space. Our star does not stand in one place. It rushes around the center of the Milky Way at a speed of about 828,000 kilometers per hour. In this journey, the sun pulls us through different zones of the cosmic environment, some of which are extremely hostile. Right now, we are in the local interstellar cloud, which is relatively rarefied. But there is one detail that makes this story truly creepy. If the sun enters a denser cloud of gas and dust, the pressure of the interstellar medium could compress the heliosphere to the size of the Earth orbit. This would leave our planet completely naked in the face of hard cosmic radiation and dust that would begin to destroy the ozone layer. We depend on the ability of our star to push away the surrounding chaos, but this ability is not eternal. And at this exact moment, you begin to understand that even the most technological civilization is only a hostage of processes that we cannot control. The sun is not just a source of light. It is a giant gravitational anchor that holds trillions of icy objects in the Oort cloud at a distance of almost 2 light-years. Any serious fluctuation of the solar mass or the passing of another massive star nearby could destabilize these objects, sending them to the inner solar system. This means that the sun can become the cause of a cascading bombardment of Earth by comets the size of small countries. However, the final act of this cosmic drama looks even more detached and cold than any fiery explosion. After the red giant phase, when the sun exhausts the last supplies of fuel, it will shed its outer layers into space, forming a planetary nebula. This will be a beautiful but dead sight that will be observed only by the distant telescopes of other civilizations if they exist at that time. What will remain of our majestic star is a white dwarf, an object the size of Earth, but with a mass equal to half of the solar mass. 1 cubic centimeter of this matter will weigh a ton. Imagine this cooling core that will shine with a dim blue light for trillions of years. The sun will turn into a cosmic tombstone that will slowly transform into a black dwarf, a frozen crystal of carbon and oxygen lost in the endless darkness of the expanding universe. But this is not even the scariest part of our reflections, because we realize our own insignificance before this process. We are used to considering ourselves the center of history, but for the sun, we are only an accidental side effect of chemical reactions on a tiny piece of rock that happened to be in the habitable zone. The sun was never created for us. It existed for billions of years before our appearance, and will continue its evolution for billions of years after the last human voice falls silent in the radiation hell. Every breath you take, and every thought is a product of the energy of the star, which in the final result will take back everything it gave you. We live in the shadow of a monster that is sleeping, and every minute of our peace is only a statistical error in its chaotic schedule. The universe never promised us safety, and the sun is the best proof that we exist on borrowed resources in a hostile environment. Our star is the great architect, and simultaneously the great destroyer who feels neither pity nor anger. It is simply physics in its most extreme and inevitable manifestation. When you go outside the next time and feel the warmth on your face, remember that you are feeling the touch of thousand-year-old photons born in the heart of a nuclear hell that will one day become our grave. We are only dust against the background of majesty that does not know our name. And in this realization lies not only fear, but also a deep existential respect for the power that created the world, and that will inevitably complete it. Please give a like and subscribe to the channel. Become a part of our crew. In this cold space, we hold together until the last atom dissolves into nothingness.